However, we do have some major challenges that face us today, and I don't think we should shy away from those as we talk about the state of Somalia's security landscape. In particular, the struggle to combat al-Shabaab, I would say, is pretty much at a stalemate right now. Since 2015, with the capture of major towns in Ghetto and Bay region, Bardere and Dinsur, we really haven't had a major change in the front lines. The long-expected Juba River Valley offensive to actually liberate the remaining, bridge towns, if you will, on the Juba River, Jamame, Jilib, Wale, Sako, has been pending for many years. I mean, frankly, pending since the Kenyans helped to liberate Kismayo from al-Shabaab control in roughly 2012. That has meant that we have more disruption operations, small-scale operations supported by AMISOM and the Somali National Army that can go and disrupt al-Shabaab activities in a particular village, but are unable to hold ground over time. So those operations might go and chase Shabaab elements out of a town, but then a couple hours later, those forces, be it AMISOM or SNA, have to retreat back to a forward operating base, and al-Shabaab returns to control. In many instances, we have had very positive examples set by some clans, sub-clans, trying to resist al-Shabaab, particularly in recent months, efforts to resist forced recruitment of children. But we've actually not seen an ability by the federal government or the federal states, or frankly the international community, to actually surge the required security and financial assistance to support those clans in their longer-term resistance to al-Shabaab. As a result, al-Shabaab basically surrounds and crushes the resistance movement, and it'll take months, if not several years, in order to kind of resurrect that clan's ability to stand independently, to join a federal state, to join the federal government, and to push back against al-Shabaab. The Somali National Army, I think Abdi Said is very correct in saying that we have a much better understanding of the challenges facing the Army today, particularly after President Farmajo launched the Operational Readiness Assessment, the ORA, in terms of its weaknesses in command and control, in numbers, reported numbers versus the reality on the ground in terms of weapon systems. Unfortunately, this is something that hasn't been addressed to the point that we actually know what the problems are increasingly, but the reforms are not taking place to make the SNA more effective in late 2018 by comparison with where they were in mid-2017. So I think that's something that we could explore a bit further in the discussion as to what steps are in place today, particularly with new security leadership in the country under the new Chief of Defense Forces, Dahir Elmi, to actually get the SNA moving out in the right direction, moving beyond disruption operations, maybe able to support more some of these local resistance efforts to al-Shabaab. And then there is this long-term discussion that's going on about other effective forces in the country that really aren't part of the Somali National Army and really don't have sufficient support to fight Shabaab on their own. These are state-level forces, the Puntland Darawish, the Southwest State Special Police, the Jubaland Darawish. All of these are officially recognized parts of the Somali national security apparatus. They're just recognized functioning at the state level as paramilitary forces trying to combat al-Shabaab. However, continued, I'd say, political and policy issues surrounding the status of these forces means they really aren't receiving international support, even if they are the closest to the ground, the forces with some of the best in local organic intelligence about the enemy. And because they are fighting to protect their own home areas, their own families very close to Shabaab, they are some of the most motivated forces we have in the counterterrorism fight at the moment. Regarding the state of al-Shabaab in all of this, they are pretty much, I'd say right now, in their comfort zone. They do not control major cities in most cases. I'd say Jilib is a major exception. That's kind of one of their hubs of operations down in the Juba River Valley. But they are able to exist in the bush, in rural areas, in a way that AMISOM and the SNA currently cannot get at them. This has enabled al-Shabaab to set up effectively a parallel governance system that challenges the authority of the federal government at the margins of urban areas. We see al-Shabaab running courts We see them certainly imposing taxes. I mean, this is a constant complaint, and those taxes can be financial taxes. They can be demands for livestock or agricultural produce. And in the worst cases, when local communities can't provide material assets, they demand their children. And so this level of forced recruitment of children is really reaching an intolerable point for most Somali communities. But again, they lack the wherewithal to actually resist Shabaab and are forced to give over their families. And then finally, through proselytization and dawah and all the rest, you have al-Shabaab really continuing to exercise a great deal of social control. And as much as the federal government of Somalia and its international partners have a certain vision for Somalia's future, sadly, al-Shabaab is actually pushing a very different vision and trying to push that into minds of young people. Obviously, we can talk about regular attacks. I mean, it was almost a year ago, just in a couple of days, the 14 October attacks that took place in Mogadishu, one of the largest ever suicide bombings that we've seen. And al-Shabaab does not always just do major attacks. On a regular basis, they're conducting assassinations against government officials, against civil society leaders in the country, and they seem to be able to do this with impunity. The federal government did a great job trying to prevent IEDs going off in Mogadishu earlier this year, and I think helped by some rather extreme rainfall. But the efforts that they did erecting blockades around the city also shut down commerce, also shut down civil movement. And as soon as those get lifted, you actually see al-Shabaab able to move its attacks back into town. We also have increased al-Shabaab activity in locations such as Ghetto, Middle Shabelle, certainly a surge of operations just the north of Mogadishu, and up in Galmudug State in the center of the country. I'd say worrying from the international perspective for anyone who reads Kenyan newspapers was a report from back in about February of a potential VBIED, again, leaving Somali territory and entering Kenyan territory, being caught in the Merti area of Isiolo district on its way potentially to conduct an attack in Nairobi or another major urban part of Kenya. I think we haven't really seen significant al-Shabaab external operations since the Westgate Mall attack, the Garissa College massacre. So any indication that the external operations elements of al-Shabaab are increasing their capacity or desire to attack really needs to be taken seriously. And then finally, as Abdi Saeed mentioned, we also have the slow shift of ISIS operations outside of the pocket they've been in south of Kandala, north of Iskushaban in Puntland, with more and more small attacks, mostly assassinations, down in Mogadishu and the outskirts of Mogadishu. These are small right now, but they really need to be addressed before they grow. And just like ISIS globally, we've seen a lot of extreme media attention or media savvy by the ISIS guys actually videotaping some of the attacks.